Toronto FC have sold Jayden Nelson to Rosenborg in the Norwegian First Division. Now, as far as transfers that have a lot of depth to them in terms of what that transfer actually means for the player, for the teams involved, etc., this one actually has quite a bit going on, and because of MLS's roster rules, it gets a bit more confusing as we look into it. Jayden Nelson is a 20-year-old Canadian winger slash has been used kind of as a central midfielder by Toronto FC the past couple of seasons. He's made 50 appearances for Toronto FC, most coming last season when he started regularly being in the starting lineup slash a bit of a sub. Now, going into this season, in my last video when we brought in Rosted, I showed our predicted starting 11 going into the start of the season, and notably Jayden Nelson wasn't on it. At his age, it's obvious that Jayden Nelson would want to, and it would be incredibly beneficial for him to be a regular starter. Thus, a move out of TFC seemed likely. Add in the fact that A, there is significant interest for Jayden Nelson both abroad and within MLS as he's an exciting young talent, and B, his contract with TFC expires at the end of the season, and you have a perfect storm for a guy who's probably going to be transferred out. Because if he stays, we don't play him as a regular starter, his value decreases, and he becomes a free agent at the end of the year and likely leaves on his own anyways, and we get nothing for him. So moving Jayden Nelson in that regard made sense. For Jayden Nelson, he now gets to go to the Norwegian top flight in Europe. And now, yes, the Norwegian top flight is not at the level of Major League Soccer. However, for Jayden Nelson, he goes to a very good team in the Norwegian top flight. That gives him opportunity to play European football. That gives him opportunity to play regular minutes in Europe. It just makes it easier for him to A, develop and get more minutes as a player, and B, put himself more on the radar for other teams throughout Europe. So for Jayden Nelson, this move makes a ton of sense. For Rosenborg, this move makes a ton of sense because they get in a very, very talented winger who probably will do quite well in the Norwegian league. For Toronto FC, the one reason why we wouldn't be excited about this deal is the lack of depth that we have. Already, we were talking about how this team is very weak depth-wise, especially on the left side, given that we lost Schaffelberg and Petrasso so far to transfers within MLS this offseason. Jayden Nelson was kind of the last true backup left winger to Insigne on that left side. So why would a team that is already weak on depth give up their young homegrown player who is a great depth option? Well, because as I already said, his contract ends at the end of the season, so this is the only time really that we can get anything out of him. But also, because of the way MLS rules work, so the fee that is reported that we're getting in for Jayden Nelson is rumored to be around $1 million, either euros or US dollars. It's not clear, but somewhere in like the 800,000 to $1 million range in one of those two currencies, and those two currencies are pretty similar now. So like about $1 million US dollars. And with the way MLS roster rules work, when you transfer out a homegrown player, which Jayden Nelson is, any transfer fee gained from selling a homegrown player, you get 100% of. But not only do you get 100% of, you can use up to something like $1.2 million worth of transferred in fees that you get from selling homegrown players to add that to your general allocation money for the year. So TFC now can add almost $1 million into their general allocation money pool in Major League Soccer, which in MLS, that's basically like saying your team's individual salary cap is now $1 million higher than it was. So that is a lot of money that TFC can now use to go and acquire cheaper depth within Major League Soccer. If that much money is actually being added to Toronto FC's general allocation money fund, now all of a sudden you could go and get a couple solid depth pieces in MLS. A solid depth piece in MLS is only like a $200,000 a year contract. So in terms of guys floating around MLS, you could get a couple of those, or you can spend a light fee and get another guy in. So very interesting what TFC can use that money for. And so basically this ends up being a win for Nelson, win for TFC, solid move all around. The real trick is going to come in replacing him. Now this move probably means that more moves than we expected are going to happen for TFC coming in, because losing Nelson is a very big loss in the substitution area. I'd say that looking at our subs, besides the strikers, the guy who I would have been most confident to come in pretty much any game would have been Jayden Nelson, especially on the left side, given that Kosi Thompson and Jaquil Marshall-Rutty both favor the right. So now we're looking for another guy who can kind of play that left center mid / left wing role as a backup. Be interesting to see who he can get there. Victor Vazquez is in the lineup, but again, I wouldn't trust him really in a role where he has to run, and Jayden Nelson was a lot better in roles where a lot of running was involved. So some sort of depth replacement definitely is going to be brought in at some point for Toronto FC. I would imagine, especially given our injury history in the past, that would have to happen. So there are definitely now, especially with the amount of general allocation money that this transfer is going to open up, more moves happening for TFC this offseason. If anything, selling Jayden Nelson now means that probably by the time the season starts, we're going to have a couple more guys come in. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this lineup continues to develop as the season draws nearer. But best of luck to Jayden Nelson in Norway. I could see him doing quite well in that league. 50 appearances for TFC. He had 1 goal last season, which was an absolutely fantastic goal. That was his only goal for the first TFC team, though. Hopefully he gets more playtime, A, as a natural winger in Norway, and B, just more playtime in general, more starts in general. I feel like he's a guy where if he starts getting a regular shift under his belt and gets some experience in European competition in the next couple of years, we could see him in the Canadian national team, and we could potentially see him becoming a mainstay guy on the national team in time for the 2026 World Cup if Europe works out for him. But he's going to start off in Norway and he's going to build it up from there. But I can see big things coming out of him in Norway this season. So that is it for this video. As always, if you'd like to hit like, if you want to see more of my stuff, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, link is down below in the description, and I will see you next time.